As I stood outside the bar, the neon lights flickering like the remnants of my shattered trust, I felt a storm brewing inside me. The laughter and clinking glasses echoed memories of happier times, but now they felt like daggers. I had always thought of this place as a sanctuary, a backdrop to our love story. Little did I know, it had become the stage for her betrayal. My name is Mark, and my wife is Sarah. We had been married for 7 years, and for the most part, I believed we had a solid relationship. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we always found our way back to each other. But the bar, O'Malley's, was our special spot. It was where we first met, where we celebrated anniversaries, and where we shared countless late-night conversations over beers. It was a cozy place, filled with warm wood accents and dim lighting, where the bartender knew our names and our usual orders. On that fateful night, I had decided to surprise Sarah. I finished work early, my heart light with anticipation. I envisioned us laughing and reminiscing about our early days together, but as I pushed open the heavy oak door, the familiar scent of whiskey and spilled beer filled my lungs, and I felt an unsettling shift in the atmosphere. I scanned the room and my gaze landed on her. My heart dropped. There she was, laughing, her head thrown back in that way I loved, but it was not directed at me. No, it was aimed at him, the bartender. His hands casually rested on her waist, and my blood ran cold. I felt as if the world had paused, leaving only the two of them in a cruel spotlight. My mind raced, a whirlwind of disbelief and rage. How could she? How could he? The bartender, a stranger to me, had become the embodiment of my pain. The laughter that once felt like music to my ears now echoed with betrayal. I felt my hands clench into fists, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream, to confront them right then and there, but I was frozen in place, a spectator in my own life. My heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat of fury and disbelief. As the moments dragged on, I felt as if I were suffocating. I turned on my heel and left the bar, the door swinging shut behind me with a finality that matched the weight in my chest. Outside, the cool night air stung my face, but it did little to quell the fire igniting within me. I stumbled down the sidewalk, my mind racing. In that moment of anguish, a plan began to form. It was not just any plan, it was a blueprint for my revenge. I would take control. I would buy this bar, turn it into a monument of my heartbreak, and ensure that he would never lay eyes on her again. The thought was intoxicating, a sweet revenge that promised to soothe my wounded pride. I envisioned myself walking back into O'Malley's, not as a heartbroken husband but as its new owner. I would transform it, reshape it into something that reflected my pain and anger. I could see it clearly in my mind. The bar would be a reminder of what they had done to me, a place where they would rue the day they crossed me. As I walked away from the bar, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. My heart was still heavy with betrayal, but now there was a flicker of determination igniting within me. I would not let this betrayal define me. I would redefine the narrative. I returned home that night, my mind racing with schemes. I knew I had to act fast. The thought of Sarah and that bartender together made my skin crawl. I needed to confront this head-on, to transform the very place that had been the backdrop of our love into a symbol of my revenge. The next day, I found myself standing outside O'Malley's again, my heart pounding with anticipation. I approached the owner, an older man named Frank who had been running the bar for years. I could see the weariness in his eyes as he wiped down the bar top. "Frank, I want to buy this place," I said, my voice steady despite the storm swirling inside me. He looked up, eyebrows raised in surprise. "Are you serious?" "I'm dead serious," I replied, my resolve hardening with each word. This place would be mine, and I would reshape it into something that reflected my pain and anger. As I began to implement my changes, I realized that the consequences of my actions would be far-reaching. But at that moment, all I could think about was reclaiming my power and ensuring that the bartender would no longer be a part of Sarah's life. The next few days were a blur of meetings and paperwork. I pored over contracts, inspected the bar's finances, and negotiated with Frank, who seemed more than willing to sell. O'Malley's had seen better days, and I think he was eager to retire. The thought of owning the place filled me with a sense of purpose, a drive to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But the more I immersed myself in the business side of things, the more I felt the weight of my emotions pressing down on me. I had thought that buying the bar would be a straightforward process, but it became clear that it was going to take a lot more than just money to transform this place. I needed a plan, not just for the bar, but for how I would deal with Sarah and the aftermath of my decisions. The night I officially became the owner of O'Malley's, I stood behind the bar, running my fingers over the polished wood. The familiar scent of beer and whiskey hung in the air, but now it felt different. This was my territory. I could already envision the changes I wanted to make. I would renovate the interior, remove the old decor that reminded me of happier times, and rebrand it entirely. But first, I had to ensure that the bartender, Jake, I learned his name, would be gone. I didn't want him anywhere near Sarah. I wanted to erase him from her life, from my life. I knew I could use my new position to make that happen, but I needed to tread carefully. I began by observing the staff, getting to know them while also assessing their loyalty. Jake was popular among the patrons, but he was also arrogant, flaunting his charm and good looks. I could see how he drew people in, especially women. It made my blood boil. I couldn't let him continue to work in my bar, especially not with Sarah around. One evening, as I was cleaning up after a busy shift, I approached one of the waitresses, Lisa, who had been working at O'Malley's for a couple of years. She had seen the dynamics of the bar unfold, and I hoped she could give me insight into Jake's behavior. "Hey Lisa," I said, leaning against the bar, "what do you think of Jake?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the question. "He's good at his job, but well, he can be a bit too flirtatious, you know." "Flirtatious?" I echoed, my fists clenching involuntarily. "Yeah, he likes the attention. He's always charming the customers, especially the women." I felt a wave of anger wash over me. "And what about Sarah? Has he ever tried anything with her?" Lisa hesitated, looking around before leaning in closer. "I don't know for sure, but I've seen how he looks at her. He's definitely interested." That was all I needed to hear. I felt the fury bubbling up inside me, and a sense of satisfaction washed over me. I now had justification for what I needed to do. I would fire him, and I would make it clear why. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to transform O'Malley's. I hired a contractor to update the bar's interior, ripping out the old booths and replacing them with sleek, modern furniture. I added new lighting, making it brighter and less intimate. I wanted to strip away the nostalgia that had once made it our special place. During this time, I also started to distance myself from Sarah. I didn't want her to suspect anything just yet. I told her I was busy with work, and she seemed to accept it, unaware of my true intentions. I could see the confusion in her eyes when I canceled our plans to go out, but I brushed it off, convincing myself it was for the best. She needed to see what I was capable of. One evening, as I was finalizing the plans for the bar's reopening, I sat at the bar, contemplating my next move. I could already envision the look on Sarah's face when she walked into a transformed O'Malley's. I imagined her searching for the warmth and familiarity of the place, only to find it had become a cold, unwelcoming environment. Then, I made the call to Jake. I knew I had to do it personally. I wanted him to know that his days were numbered. I found him finishing up a shift one night, and I motioned for him to come over. "Jake," I said, my voice steady, "we need to talk." He looked at me, a smirk on his face. "What's up, boss?" I leaned in closer, my tone low. "You're fired." His smile faltered, and I could see the confusion in his eyes. "What? Why, I'm one of the best here." "Yeah, you were," I replied, my voice cold. "But I can't have someone like you working here. You've crossed a line." "What are you talking about?" he shot back, his bravado faltering. "I know about you and Sarah," I said, watching as his expression shifted from disbelief to realization. His mouth opened, but no words came out. I could see the panic setting in. "You're making a mistake," he finally stammered. "Am I?" I leaned back, letting the silence hang between us. "You think you can just flirt with my wife and get away with it? Not anymore." With that, I turned away, leaving him standing there, speechless. I felt a rush of satisfaction flood through me. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and it felt good. But as I drove home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I had set the wheels in motion, but I knew there would be consequences. In the days that followed Jake's dismissal, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. I had taken decisive action, yet I knew the storm was far from over. I had successfully severed the connection between my wife and the bartender, but the repercussions of my choices loomed large, casting a shadow over my every move. I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation with Sarah. I could already picture the scene, her confusion morphing into anger, then disbelief. I had tried to distance myself emotionally, but the thought of her reaction gnawed at me. I needed to be ready for whatever she might throw at me. The bar's reopening was just around the corner, and I had gone all out to make it a grand affair. I wanted to turn O'Malley's into a place that felt entirely different from what it had been. I hired a DJ, revamped the drink menu, and even organized a special promotion for the first night. I wanted to show everyone, especially Sarah, that I was in control now. The night of the reopening arrived and I stood behind the bar, watching as the patrons filtered in. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and the sounds of clinking glasses. I felt a surge of pride as I surveyed the transformed space, bright, modern, and unrecognizable from the cozy bar it once was. But as the crowd grew, my thoughts turned to Sarah. Would she come? Would she even recognize this place without the warmth that had once defined it? I had sent her a message earlier in the day, inviting her to join me for the reopening, but she hadn't responded. Hours passed, and I found myself anxiously glancing at the door, hoping to see her walk in. Instead, I was met with a steady stream of familiar faces, friends, acquaintances, and even some regulars from before. Each smile felt like a dagger, a reminder of what I had lost. Then, just as I was beginning to lose hope, I saw her. Sarah stepped through the door, her eyes wide as she took in the changes. She looked beautiful as always, but there was a tension in her posture that made my heart race. "Mark," she said, her voice barely above the music. "What happened to this place?" I forced a smile, trying to mask the storm brewing inside me. "Welcome to the new O'Malley's," I said, gesturing around. Thought it was time for a change. Her brow furrowed as she stepped closer, taking in the bright lights and the new decor. "This is different, I don't know if I like it." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Change can be good, I just thought we could use a fresh start." She studied my face, searching for something. "Have you been okay? You've been so distant lately." I felt a pang of guilt. I had kept my distance, but it was all part of my plan. "I've been busy with the bar," I replied, deflecting her concern. "You know how it is." As the night wore on, I watched as she mingled with our friends, her laughter cutting through the noise. But I could see the confusion in her eyes whenever she glanced around. She was trying to reconcile the changes with the memories she held dear, and it was clear that she was struggling. Then she approached me again, her expression serious. "Mark, can we talk? I feel like there's something you're not telling me." I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This was it, the confrontation I had been both anticipating and dreading. I nodded and led her to a quieter corner of the bar, away from the crowd. "Is this about Jake?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. I felt my heart race. "What do you mean?" "Lisa told me you fired him," she said, crossing her arms defensively. "Was it because of me?" I took a deep breath, knowing I had to tread carefully. "I just didn't think he was a good fit for the bar anymore," I lied, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. Her expression hardened. "Mark, you know that's not true. Jake was one of the best bartenders here. You can't just fire someone for personal reasons." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to lash out. "It's my bar now. I can do what I want." She shook her head, frustration seeping into her voice. "This isn't just about the bar to you, is it? You're angry, and I get that. But this isn't the way to handle it." I felt a flare of anger rise within me. "What do you know about how I feel?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You're the one who betrayed me." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of our reality. I watched as her face fell, and for a moment I felt a pang of regret, but it quickly faded, replaced by the heat of my anger. "Mark, I made a mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "But you're not being fair. You can't just erase everything we had because of one mistake." That struck a nerve. "One mistake? You call cheating on your husband one mistake?" I spat, my voice low but filled with venom. Her eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was confused and it just happened. I thought we were in a rough patch and I made a terrible choice. You can't just justify it, I replied, my heart racing as the conversation spiraled. I thought we were better than that. I thought so too, she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. But you're pushing me. Eh? You've been distant, Mark. I didn't know how to reach you. I felt my resolve wavering, but I pushed it down. I'm not the one who cheated, Sarah. The silence that followed was deafening. We stood there, locked in a battle of emotions, both of us unwilling to back down. As I looked into her eyes, I realized that this confrontation was only the tip of the iceberg. I had tried to take control of my pain through revenge, but I was beginning to see that it might come at a cost I hadn't anticipated. The night wore on, but I felt a growing disconnection between us, even as the bar buzzed with life. I had set out to transform this place into an embodiment of my anger, but as I watched Sarah struggle with the changes, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing more than I had bargained for. I had taken the first step toward revenge, but I was beginning to wonder if it was the right path. The tension in the air hung thick after our confrontation, and I could feel the weight of my decisions pressing down on me. I had turned O'Malley's into a battleground, but now, standing there with Sarah, I realized that the cost of my revenge was far greater than I had anticipated. As the night progressed, I tried to focus on the bar and the patrons who had come to celebrate its reopening. Laughter and music filled the space, but I felt detached from it all. My mind was racing, replaying the argument with Sarah, her hurt expression burned into my memory. I had wanted to reclaim my power, but instead I felt like I was losing control. I stepped behind the bar, pouring drinks and engaging with the customers, trying to drown out the turmoil inside me. But every time I glanced over at Sarah, I felt a pang of guilt. She was laughing with friends, but there was an edge to her laughter that suggested she was putting on a brave face. I hated that I had put her in this position. Later that night, as the crowd began to thin out, I found myself standing alone at the bar, wiping down the counter. The lights dimmed and the music faded, leaving only the sound of my own thoughts. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I had built this place up as a fortress of my anger, but it was crumbling around me. Just then Sarah approached, her expression softer than it had been earlier. "Can we talk again?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and hope. Maybe this time we could have a real conversation, one that didn't revolve around accusations and anger. We stepped outside, the cool night air refreshing against my skin. The street was quiet and I could hear the distant sounds of laughter from the bar. Sarah turned to face me, her eyes searching mine. "I'm sorry for how I reacted earlier," she said. I don't know how to handle all of this." I rubbed the back of my neck, feeling the tension in my shoulders. "I don't know how to handle it either," I admitted. "I thought that if I took control of the bar, it would help me regain some sense of power after what happened." "You think buying the bar will fix everything?" she asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "No, but I thought it would help me feel better," I replied, my frustration spilling over. "I wanted to erase Jake from our lives to make sure he couldn't hurt us anymore. But you're hurting me in the process," she said, her voice trembling. "This isn't just about him, it's about us, and you're pushing me further away." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so consumed by my desire for revenge that I had lost sight of what really mattered. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" I asked, my voice softer now. "I want you to talk to me," she said, her eyes pleading. "I want us to work through this together. I know I messed up, but I still love you." I felt a swell of emotion at her confession. "I love you too, but it's hard to see past what you did," I admitted. "I don't know how to move forward." She stepped closer, her eyes glistening in the dim light. "We can't go back to how things were, but we can create something new. We just need to be honest with each other." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder," I said. "I understand," she replied, her voice steady. "But firing Jake isn't going to fix what we have. We need to face this together, not try to erase it." I nodded slowly, realizing she was right. My plan for revenge had become an obsession, clouding my judgment. I had thought that by taking control of the bar, I could regain control of my life, but it had only pushed us further apart. "Okay," I said finally, my heart heavy. I'll try, but it's going to take time. She reached out, squeezing my hand. I'm willing to wait. I want to rebuild what we had, but we need to be honest and communicate. As we stood there, the cool breeze wrapping around us, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could salvage our relationship after all, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, and I had to face the consequences of my actions. The next few days were a whirlwind. As I tried to balance the bar's operations with my efforts to reconnect with Sarah, I poured myself into the business, determined to make O'Malley's a success, but I also made a conscious effort to include Sarah in the process. I wanted her to feel valued, to see that I was committed to our relationship. I asked her to help me with the bar's rebranding, and to my surprise, she agreed. We spent long hours together, brainstorming ideas for the new menu and redesigning the logo. It felt good to work together, to find common ground amidst the chaos of our emotions. But as we worked side by side, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still holding onto my anger toward Jake. I had fired him, but I hadn't truly let go of the resentment I felt. I knew I needed to confront that part of myself if I wanted to move forward. One evening, as Sarah and I were finalizing the new drink menu, I brought up the topic of Jake. I still can't believe I fired him, I admitted, my voice low. It felt good in the moment, but now I'm not sure it was the right decision. Sarah looked at me, her expression thoughtful. It's okay to feel that way. You were hurt and you acted out of anger, but you have to let it go if you want to move forward. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I know, I just need to figure out how to do that. As the days turned into weeks, I focused on rebuilding my relationship with Sarah while also trying to find a sense of closure regarding Jake. I realized that holding on to my anger was only going to drag me down. But just as I thought I was making progress, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Frank, the former owner of O'Malley's. "Hey, Mark, I wanted to let you know that Jake been trying to reach out to me," he said, his voice serious. "He's got some things he wants to discuss." My heart raced at the mention of Jake's name. I felt a surge of anger bubbling up inside me, but I forced it back down. "What does he want?" I asked, my tone clipped. "He wants to talk about his termination and possibly return to the bar," Frank continued. "I thought you should know." I felt a rush of emotions, anger, confusion, and even a hint of fear. I had thought I had put an end to that chapter of my life, but it seemed it was far from over. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady. As I hung up the phone, I felt the shadows of my past creeping back in. I had worked hard to create a new beginning with Sarah, but Jake's potential return threatened to unravel everything I had fought for. The days following my conversation with Frank felt like a tightrope walk. I had worked so hard to rebuild my relationship with Sarah and transform O'Malley's, but now Jake's looming presence threatened to topple everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that my past was clawing its way back into my life, and I had to confront it head-on. Sarah and I had been making progress, spending more time together and enjoying our collaboration on the bar's new direction. The laughter we shared felt genuine, a reminder of the connection we once had. But every time I glanced at the bar's entrance, my heart would race, wondering if Jake would walk through those doors again. One evening, as we were finalizing the drink menu, I finally decided to bring up the conversation I'd had with Frank. "Sarah, we need to talk about Jake," I said, my voice steady but my heart pounding. She looked up, her expression cautious. "What about him?" "He wants to come back," I said, watching her reaction closely. "What, are you serious?" Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Yeah," Frank called me. "He said Jake wants to discuss his termination." Sarah sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "Mark, I know this is difficult, but if he comes back, we need to handle it maturely. I don't want you to lash out again." I felt a surge of frustration at her words. "You think I'm just going to let him waltz back in here? He's the reason we're in this mess in the first place." "I understand that, but we can't control everything. If he comes back, we need to set boundaries. It's not about him, it's about us." Her words cut deep, and I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to lash out. "I don't want him around, I don't trust him, and I don't want to share this place with him." "Then we need to talk to Frank," she replied firmly. "Let's figure out what our options are and how we can protect ourselves, but we can't make rash decisions based on anger." I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my chest. She was right. I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions. "Okay, let's talk to Frank," I said finally, my voice resigned. The next day, I arranged a meeting with Frank to discuss Jake's potential return. As I entered the bar, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had spent so much time trying to build a new foundation for my life, and the idea of Jake stepping back into it felt like a betrayal. Frank was already waiting for me, and as we sat down, I could see the concern etched on his face. "Mark, I know this is a tough situation," he began. "Jake has reached out to me several times. He's struggling to find work since his termination." "Good," I responded, my voice cold. "He deserves it." Frank sighed, looking at me earnestly. "I understand your anger, but I think it's worth considering what he can bring to the bar. He was a great bartender and the customers liked him." I shot him a glare. "You're not seriously suggesting I hire him back, are you?" "No, I'm saying we need to be practical. If you deny him the chance to return, it could lead to conflict that will affect the bar's reputation." I clenched my jaw, feeling the frustration bubbling over. "I don't care about his reputation. I care about mine, and I don't want him around." "Mark," Frank said, his tone firm, "you need to think about what's best for the business. If you push him away, it could cause problems for you in the long run." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. What if I set some ground rules? If he comes back, he stays away from Sarah. No flirting, no personal interactions. Frank nodded slowly. "That's fair. You can establish boundaries. But you have to be prepared for the possibility that he might not accept those terms." "I don't care," I said, my voice steady. "I'll make it clear that I'm in charge now and I won't tolerate any nonsense." As I left the meeting, I felt a mix of determination and anxiety. I was willing to fight for what I had built, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I had to confront Jake and lay down the law, and I hoped that by doing so, I could finally put this chapter behind me. That evening, Sarah and I sat down to discuss the outcome of my meeting with Frank. "So, what did he say?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "He thinks we should consider bringing Jake back," I replied, watching her reaction closely. Her expression shifted and I could see the concern in her eyes. "What do you want to do?" "I think I can handle it," I said, my voice steady. "I'll set boundaries. He won't have a chance to hurt us again." Sarah nodded, but I could tell she was still apprehensive. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want this to turn into another fight." "I'll handle it," I assured her, trying to mask the uncertainty that lingered in my gut. The following week, I arranged for Jake to come in for a meeting. As the day approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and anger. Would he come in with arrogance, expecting everything to go back to how it was before? Or would he show some humility and acknowledge the damage he had caused? When the day finally arrived, I stood behind the bar, preparing myself for the confrontation. I had cleared the space, ensuring there were no distractions. The door swung open and Jake stepped in, looking just as cocky as I remembered. "Mark," he said, a smirk on his face, "glad to see you're still running things." I felt my blood boil at his casual demeanor. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Jake. We need to talk." He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "About what?" "My termination." "About your potential return to the bar," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm willing to consider it, but there are rules." "Rules?" he echoed, feigning confusion. "Yes. You'll stay away from Sarah. No flirting, no personal interactions. If you can't respect that, you're out." Again, he leaned against the bar, crossing his arms. "You think you can dictate my behavior? I'm the owner now, Jake. You want your job back, you follow my rules. It's that simple." He smirked, but I could see the tension in his posture. "Fine, I'll play nice. But you know I'm not the only one who can bring in customers." I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to remain calm. "This isn't a negotiation. Either you want to work here on my terms or you can find another bar. It's your choice." He hesitated, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'll give it a shot, but don't think I'll be your puppet." "Just remember, I'm watching you," I replied, my voice low. As he left, I felt a mix of triumph and dread. I had stood my ground, but I knew this was only the beginning. Jake's return would undoubtedly stir up feelings I thought I had buried. That night, I went home to Sarah, feeling the weight of my choices pressing down on me. As we sat together, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of a precipice. I had fought to reclaim my life, but now I was left wondering if I had made the right decision. The days following Jake's return to O'Malley's were tense. I had set my boundaries, but the uncertainty of his presence hung over me like a dark cloud. I tried to focus on the bar's operations, but my mind often drifted to thoughts of Sarah and how she was handling everything. Would she be able to resist his charm? Would she see the man I had seen when I fired him, or would she fall back into the comfort of familiarity? As the weeks went by, I watched Jake closely. He maintained a professional demeanor at work, but I could see the undercurrents of tension whenever Sarah was around. He would flirt with the customers, and I felt the familiar anger bubbling up inside me when I caught him stealing glances at her. I had thought I could handle this, but the reality was far more complicated than I had anticipated. One evening, as the bar filled with patrons, I noticed Sarah laughing with a group of friends at a table near the back. Jake was behind the bar, pouring drinks, but I could see him sneaking glances in her direction. My heart raced with a mix of jealousy and anger. I couldn't let this continue. As I approached the bar, I leaned in close to Jake, my voice low and steady. "Keep your eyes to yourself," I warned, my tone cold. He smirked, an infuriating confidence radiating from him. "Relax, Mark, I'm just doing my job." "Your job doesn't involve flirting with my wife," I snapped, feeling the heat rising in my chest. "Who said anything about flirting? She's just a customer," he replied, his nonchalance only infuriating me further. I stepped back, forcing myself to take a deep breath. I had to keep my cool, but the tension was palpable. I couldn't let him provoke me. I glanced over at Sarah, who had just caught my eye. She smiled, and for a moment I felt a sense of calm wash over me. But then I saw Jake lean over the bar to whisper something in her ear, and my heart dropped. I felt the anger boil over again, and I couldn't hold back. "Sarah," I called out, my voice cutting through the noise of the bar. She turned, looking startled. "What's wrong?" I could see the confusion in her eyes, but I didn't care. "Can we talk?" She nodded, and I led her away from the crowd, my heart racing. "What was he saying to you?" I demanded as soon as we were out of earshot. "Mark, it was nothing," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "He was just joking around." "Joking around? You think it's okay for him to flirt with you like that?" I felt the anger surge inside me, and I struggled to keep my voice down. "Mark, you're overreacting," she said, her tone growing more serious. "Jake is trying to be friendly. This is a bar, and it's his job to interact with customers." I shook my head, frustration boiling over. "I don't care if it's his job. I told him to stay away from you." She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "And I appreciate that, but I'm an adult. I can handle myself. You don't have to fight every battle for me." "I just don't want to see you hurt again," I said, my voice softer now. "I know that," she replied, her expression softening. "But you have to trust me. I'm not going to fall for him again. I love you, Mark." I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease slightly. "I want to believe you," I admitted, "but it's hard when I see him around." "Then let's focus on us," she said, her voice steady. "We can't let him dictate our relationship. We need to communicate and trust each other." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe we could get through this together after all. But part of me still felt uneasy. I had to confront my own insecurities if I wanted to move forward. As the weeks turned into months, I tried to let go of the anger I felt toward Jake. I focused on improving O'Malley's, pouring my energy into the bar and working alongside Sarah. We began to rebuild our relationship, sharing laughter and moments that reminded me of the love we once had. But Jake's presence continued to be a thorn in my side. He maintained a professional facade, but I could tell he was waiting for any opportunity to slip back into Sarah's good graces. I felt the weight of my decisions hanging over me, and it was exhausting. One night, after a particularly busy shift, I found myself sitting at the bar nursing a drink. Sarah was chatting with some friends, and I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. But then I caught Jake's eye, and the tension returned. He leaned against the bar, a smirk on his face. "Looks like you're having a rough night, Mark," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Just keeping an eye on you," I replied, my voice low and steady. "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere," he said, his smirk widening. I felt the anger bubble up again, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Just remember the boundaries I set. I won't hesitate to remind you if you cross them." He chuckled, but there was an edge to his laughter. "You're really worried about me, huh?" I leaned in closer, my voice low. "This is my bar, Jake. Don't forget it." As he turned away, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I had stood my ground, but I knew this was only a temporary victory. The battle was far from over. The next few days were a blur of activity. O'Malley's was thriving, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had put my heart into the bar, and it was beginning to pay off. But deep down, I knew that the real test was still ahead. One evening, as Sarah and I were closing up, I decided to bring up the topic of Jake again. "How do you really feel about him being back?" I asked, watching her closely. She paused, her expression thoughtful. "Okay with it. I think he knows his boundaries now, and I trust you to keep things in check." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "I just don't want to go through what we did before. I can't handle that again." "I don't want that either," she replied, stepping closer. "But I need you to trust me." "I'm trying," I said, my voice earnest. Just then the door swung open and Jake walked in. My heart raced as I turned to face him. "Hey, Mark," he said, an easy smile on his face. "I just wanted to check in." "Everything's fine," I replied, my voice steady. "Just closing up for the night." "Good to hear," he said, his gaze flicking to Sarah. "How's it going?" "We're good," she replied, her tone polite but firm. Jake nodded, but I could see the flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Great. Just wanted to make sure everything was running smoothly." As he turned to leave, I felt a sense of triumph. I had faced him down, and I was beginning to feel more confident in my ability to protect what was mine. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I had fought hard to reclaim my life, but I knew there would be challenges ahead. In the end, I realized that love and trust were not easily rebuilt. They required constant effort and communication. I had to let go of my anger and focus on what truly mattered, my relationship with Sarah and the future we could build together. As I locked up the bar that night, I felt a sense of hope. I had faced my demons, and while the road ahead was uncertain, I knew that together we could navigate whatever came our way. I had transformed O'Malley's into a place of healing, a testament to our resilience. And as I walked out into the night, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, hand in hand with the woman I loved. In that moment, I realized that revenge had not brought me the closure I sought. It was love, understanding, and the willingness to fight for each other that would guide us forward. And for the first time in a long while, I felt truly free.